The light dies early over the Baltic in late September, a bruised twilight settling across Tallinn's harbor like a hand pressed gently over the city's face. The air carries the bite of coming winter and the smell of diesel, salt, and rust. At the passenger terminal, families drag suitcases across worn concrete while truckers maneuver their rigs toward the yawning mouth of the MV Estonia, a 16,000-ton ferry that has made this crossing between Tallinn and Stockholm hundreds of times. The ship waits at the dock, her hull white and blue, her lines built for purpose rather than beauty. She is familiar, routine, unremarkable, the kind of vessel people board without much thought, trusting that someone else has checked the bolts and welds and systems that stand between them and the cold sea below. By the time the ramp comes up, 989 people are aboard, 211 crew and 778 passengers. Inside the cavernous car deck, truck drivers secure their loads with practiced efficiency, wrapping chains around axles, testing tension, moving with the tired rhythm of men who know this ritual well. A young Estonian trucker, maybe 25, jokes with a dockworker about the weather forecast. They both glance toward the darkening sky and shrug. The Baltic is always rough this time of year. The Estonia is always fine. Up the passenger gangways, people shuffle aboard with the small burdens of overnight travel, backpacks, shopping bags, a child's stuffed animal clutched tight. There are Estonians seeking work in Sweden's stronger economy, Swedes returning from business trips, families visiting relatives scattered across the post-Soviet landscape. An elderly couple boards slowly, the woman holding her husband's arm, talking softly about grandchildren in Stockholm. A young mother guides her daughter, maybe 10 years old, toward their cabin, promising they will watch the sunrise together from the deck in the morning. The crew, 211 Estonians and Swedes, move through their routines with the easy confidence of people who have done this 1,000 times. They check manifests, assign cabins, prep the kitchens and bars for a night at sea. On the bridge, the senior officer on watch reviews the weather reports one more time. A gale is building out there, force 9 winds forecast, seas running high. Serious, but nothing the Estonia has not handled before. Nothing that suggests this crossing will be anything but another night between two cities. At 9 p.m., the engines rumble to life, a deep vibration that travels through steel and bone. Mooring lines fall away. The Estonia backs from the dock, swings her bow west, and slips past the harbor lights into the gathering dark. Behind her, Tallinn glows softly against the sky. Ahead, the Baltic stretches black and restless, 240 miles to Stockholm. The ship is full but not crowded. In the pub Admiral, passengers settle around tables with beers and coffee, shuffling cards, making small talk. Some joke about the weather, about whether the ship will roll tonight. A few off-duty crew members join the crowd, relaxing into the familiar rhythm of a crossing. In the cabins below, families arrange their belongings and prepare for sleep. Children press their faces to portholes, watching the lights of land fade into nothing. No one in those lounges or cabins is thinking about the hardware at the very front of the ship, the bow visor, a 55-ton steel door that swings upward to let vehicles load and unload in port. Fixed steel hooks and massive pins lock it shut, designed to bite into sockets the size of a man's fist and hold against the battering of head seas at speed. The Estonia is 14 years old. She has crossed rough water many times. The visor has been struck, rattled, strained. Investigation records will later talk about worn locks, hairline cracks, repairs that never quite kept up with the punishment of the Baltic. Tonight, as the ship drives into the swells, it looks solid enough. It always has. The Estonia powers west at 15 knots, her bow rising and falling as the waves build. The swells are long and dark, crowned with white foam that glows briefly in the ship's lights before vanishing into the void. Wind screams across the superstructure, rattling antennas and safety rails, but inside it is a distant howl under the steady thrum of engines. In the public spaces, passengers adjust to the rhythm.
Some feel queasy and retreat to their cabins. Others stay in the lounges, bracing themselves against the roll, sipping drinks, talking about nothing in particular. The young trucker from Tallinn sits at a table in the pub Admiral, nursing a beer, half listening to Swedish he doesn't quite follow. Nearby, a middle-aged man plays solitaire, his cards drifting slightly with each roll. Outside the windows, there is only blackness and the occasional burst of spray. Below, on the car deck, the truck sits silent and heavy, chained to the floor. Overhead lights cast long shadows between trailers. The space smells of oil and rubber and the faint tang of sea air seeping through ventilation ducts. Crewman Aero Osmia walks the deck on a routine patrol, checking for loose cargo, testing tie-downs. The chains are tight, the vehicles are secure, the deck is dry. He moves on. Deep in the hull, engineers monitor gauges and listen to turbines and hydraulics. Everything hums as it should. The ship flexes and groans, steel under stress, a sound as familiar as breathing to people who work at sea. Midnight comes and goes, the storm builds, waves growing taller, intervals shorter. The Estonia drops into troughs and climbs the next swell, her bow slamming into water with a force that sends shudders through the frame. On the bridge, officers watch radar, monitor autopilot, make small course changes to find a gentler angle through the seas. The instruments show no alarms, the ship behaves as expected. But forward, at the very tip of the hull, something is changing. Each impact drives tons of green water against the visor. The locks groan, the metal flexes. Somewhere inside that massive hinge and locking system, a crack widens, a weld weakens. The forces are immense, relentless, and the visor, designed to hold, assumed to hold, begins to lose its grip. 1:15 a.m., the first warning. A shudder runs through the ship that feels wrong, sharper, deeper. In the cabins, passengers stir. Some sit up, listening, trying to decide if they imagined it. The young mother rests a hand on her daughter's shoulder, murmuring that it is just the waves. Down in the pub Admiral, a glass slides off a table and shatters. People laugh nervously. Someone cracks a joke about Baltic turbulence. In the machinery spaces, third engineer Kalle Sipila gets a call from the bow thruster room, water on the car deck, more than spray. He looks at the gauges, no alarms, but something is off. He radios the bridge, reporting what he's been told. On the bridge, the officer in command frowns. Water on the car deck is not supposed to be there, but it could be a minor leak, a seal, a drain. He weighs the report, water in the wrong place, but no obvious failure, and for the moment the Estonia holds speed. The trucker in the pub Admiral feels the odd vibration too, a sense that something forward has shifted. He walks to a window and peers out into the blackness, but sees only his own reflection and the faint glow of deck lights on foam. He sits back down, uneasy without knowing why. In a forward cabin, the elderly man lies awake, listening to the ship's language of creaks and groans. He has crossed this sea many times. This feels different. He squeezes his wife's hand but does not wake her. What would he say? At 1:18 a.m., Sipila finds more water. It is not pooling now. It is flowing, inches deep, spreading across the car deck. He calls the bridge again, more urgently. This time, speed is ordered down, but the change is cautious and late. The Estonia is still driving forward at close to service speed when the final moments arrive.
1:22 a.m. The breaking. The sound when it comes is unlike any other. A sharp, metallic crack, then a deep, tearing roar, as if the bow itself is being peeled open. The visor, weakened beyond endurance, tears free from its mountings and tumbles into the night, a 55-ton piece of the ship's face ripped away and swallowed by the sea. What it leaves behind is a wound. The bow ramp, meant to sit sealed behind the visor, now stands alone against the storm. There is no time to react, no chance to brace it. The next wave does the rest. The sea explodes through the opening in a roaring wall, tons of water per second blasting into the car deck, racing aft with the force of a broken dam.
The trucks, chained but helpless, lurch and slide as the deck becomes a shallow, moving sea. The young trucker in the pub Admiral hears a thunder from below and feels the deck tilt beneath his feet. Others hear it too, a deep, hollow boom, followed by alarms shrieking through the corridors. The Estonia yaws and lists hard to starboard. In an instant, everyone understands this is not just the storm. In the cabins, passengers are thrown from their bunks. The young girl screams as the room tilts. Her mother grabs for her, fumbling for life vests while the floor becomes a ramp. The elderly couple stumbles toward the door, but the corridor outside is already filling with black water, rushing upward from the car deck. The first breath of the Baltic inside the ship is freezing cold. Lights flicker, half go out. Emergency strips and lanterns snap on, painting everything in dim red. Alarms wail, overlapping with screams and the deeper groan of a hull twisting under forces it was never meant to bear. On the bridge, officers shout into radios, trying to send a mayday, trying to order an evacuation, but the list is racing ahead of the words. Instruments spark and fail. The radar screen dies. Through the windows, the horizon spins, sea where sky should be, sky where sea should be. Below, in the pub Admiral, the trucker and others scramble for the exit, climbing uphill as the deck turns into a wall. Tables and chairs slide past them, glass shatters. A man loses his grip and vanishes into darkness with a cry. The trucker reaches a stairwell and starts to climb, barefoot, hauling himself up hand over hand, one thought pounding in his head: up. In the engine rooms, 3 crew members fight rising water, still trying to do something, to keep power, to close valves, to slow the dying. They climb ladders as spaces fill behind them. One makes it to a higher deck, the other 2 do not. In the forward cabin, the family never reaches the corridor. The water hits like a freight train, smashing the door inward and filling the room in seconds. The mother tries to keep her daughter's head above the surface, but the ship is rolling, the room is spinning, and the current tears them apart. There is only cold and darkness and no way out. At 1:50 a.m., the Estonia rolls past 90 degrees. Her starboard side, which should be vertical, lies nearly flat beneath the waves. Her port side, once unseen, tilts toward the sky, streaming water, railings and windows jutting like the ribs of a broken thing. The propellers still spinning, whine in open air, blades slicing uselessly through spray. Those who have reached the outside cling to the hull itself, now an island of wet steel in a black heaving sea. Passenger Kent Hairstedt, who fought his way through a shattered window, finds himself standing on what was once a wall, barefoot on barnacled paint, wind clawing at his clothes, spray freezing on his skin. Around him, maybe 24 others, mostly young men, a few women, gasp and tremble, grabbing at railings, vents, each other. They do not know it yet, but by morning they will be counted among 24 people who managed to cling to the ship herself. The ship is dying by increments now. The stern rises higher. The flooded bow drags her down. The angle steepens. People lose their grip and slide into the water, their cries swallowed instantly by the wind and the waves. Hairstedt wraps his arms around a railing and hangs on, his body shaking uncontrollably from cold and shock. Inside the bridge, the last of the crew are swept out through shattering windows or jump, choosing the freezing sea over the steel tumbling around them. Somewhere in the chaos, the master of the ship is carried away into water so cold it steals breath and thought in seconds. At around 1:52 a.m., the Estonia gives up. The bow disappears beneath the surface, and the rest follows in a slow, terrible plunge. The stern rears almost vertically, propellers still turning, a few lights still burning, and then the sea closes over it all. The ferry slides down through 250 feet of black water and comes to rest on the seabed, bow doors gaping, car deck flooded, cabins and corridors suddenly still. On the surface, wreckage spreads, life vests, deck chairs, pieces of hull. Scattered among them, 137 people cling to anything that floats, their bodies already deep in hypothermia's grip. At 1:26 a.m., on board the ferry Silja Europa, miles to the south, a radio officer leans toward a flickering speaker and hears words buried in static. "Mayday! Mayday! Estonia! We are sinking!" He stares at the console, not quite believing it, then keys the microphone and begins the chain of alerts. Finnish and Swedish Coast Guards scramble helicopters. Ships alter course into the storm. The race begins. The sea is vast and dark. The position is uncertain. It takes hours for the first helicopter to reach the area, its searchlights sweeping over whitecaps and wreckage, looking for movement. When the crew finally spots a cluster of shapes in the beam, people clinging to an overturned raft, others scattered in the water, they realize they are looking not at a drill, but at the survivors of a ship that is no longer there. A super puma hovers, rotors fighting the gale, and lowers a rescue swimmer into the freezing sea. He reaches the first survivor, a young man shaking so violently his teeth no longer work, lips blue, eyes unfocused. The swimmer clips him into the harness and signals the winch. Slowly, agonizingly, they lift him into the noise and warmth of the helicopter. Then they go back down, again and again. 24 people are pulled from the hull and the immediate wreckage, mostly young men with enough strength and proximity to have reached the outside and held on. Over the long day of searching, that number will climb to 137 survivors in total. There are 7 people over the age of 55. There are no children under 12. The youngest survivors are teenagers, and even they a few. As dawn breaks, the Baltic shows the scale of what has happened. Clothing, luggage, seat cushions, life rafts, debris stretches across the waves. Bodies float face down in the swells, life vests barely keeping them at the surface. Helicopters and ships work through the day, pulling people from rafts, from wreckage, from the water itself. By early evening, they have found everyone still living. 137 out of 989. The numbers tell a brutal story. 111 men, 26 women, mostly passengers from public spaces, the pub admiral, the lounges, open decks, who were close enough and mobile enough to escape upward when the world turned sideways. In the days that follow, the wreckage field slowly disperses, carried by currents or sinking piece by piece. The Estonia herself rests 250 feet down on the Baltic seabed, bow opening still gaping toward the surface, cabins and corridors filled with silence and darkness. Within her hull lie 852 people, families, workers, children, the elderly couple who boarded hand in Tallinn. Their journey ends not in Stockholm's harbor, but in the cold deep, their resting place sealed by international agreement. The ship is a grave now, protected by law and by the weight of the sea above. For the 137 who survived, life continues, but is permanently marked by that night. Kent Hairstedt and others carry memories that do not fade. The tilting deck, the screaming wind, the feel of cold steel under bare feet, the faces of those who slipped away. Some speak about it, others keep the images locked inside. The demographics of survival, no children, very few elderly, tell a quiet story of proximity, mobility, and chance. Those near exits, those able to climb, those who happened to be in the right place in the brief minutes before the ship went over. In the years since, memorials have risen in Estonia and Sweden, holding the names of the dead. Families gather there on anniversaries, laying flowers, standing in silence, remembering the night the Baltic took their loved ones. The monuments are simple and dignified. No stone or bronze can contain the full weight of 852 lives, the conversations that ended mid-sentence, the futures that never reached Stockholm. The Estonia disaster joins a quiet roster of maritime tragedies that reshape how the world thinks about safety at sea. It is studied in engineering schools, discussed at maritime conferences, cited in regulations and design standards. But for those who lived through it and those who lost someone in the cold water, it is not a case study. It is a crossing that was supposed to be routine, a promise that the ship and the sea and the systems would hold, and did not. Ships still cross between Tallinn and Stockholm. Passengers still board with the same casual trust, wheeling suitcases up gangways under Baltic skies. Somewhere below their wake, in the darkness, the Estonia rests with her cargo of the lost, a monument not built but sunken, not visited but remembered.
The Estonia disaster was never just about a storm. It was about a design and regulatory system that left a modern ferry balanced one failure away from catastrophe. Weather triggered the sequence, but engineering and the culture around it determined how quickly and how completely things went wrong. In the immediate aftermath, one phrase surfaced again and again. The storm was simply too strong. Force 9 winds, 20 to 30-foot seas, a brutal Baltic night that, some said, no ship could truly withstand. It is a comforting idea in a way, an act of God, a random act of nature, beyond human control. But it is also wrong. For ferries on that route, those conditions were harsh but not extraordinary. The Estonia was sailing inside the expected operating envelope for similar ships working the Baltic in autumn. Other vessels that night diverted, slowed down, or rode out the worst of the weather without losing structural integrity. The sea was dangerous, but not unknown. The core reality is this: the storm did not invent a new kind of load, it exploited an existing weakness. Weather triggered the failure, engineering allowed it. Years before Estonia, other roll-on, roll-off ferries had already suffered bow visor damage in heavy seas, locks cracked, hinges bent, doors deformed. These incidents were scattered across companies and countries, discussed quietly, filed away, and not treated as a systemic design-level threat. This was not an unpredictable sea, it was a predictable weakness. The bow visor, a weak gate at the worst possible place. At the front of the Estonia sat a detachable bow visor, a massive steel mask that lifted to expose the bow ramp so cars and trucks could drive on and off quickly at each port. It was a design optimized for speed and convenience in turnaround, not for absorbing thousands of repeated wave impacts at 15 knots. The visor was held in place by a set of locks and hinges that were, in theory, sized to withstand sea loads. In practice, they suffered from 3 intertwined flaws. 1. Inadequate strength. The locking bolts or lugs were not robust enough for the real hydrodynamic hammering they faced in storms. 2. Poor redundancy. The system relied on a small number of critical components. Once those failed, there was no secondary barrier in the load path. 3. Fatigue under cyclic loads. Years of wave slamming had progressively weakened welds, pins, and supports, turning small cracks into critical vulnerabilities. The visor did not simply snap off from a single monstrous wave, it failed progressively. Locking bolts elongated, hinges distorted, support structures cracked. Each impact in that storm night widened the damage until the system crossed an invisible threshold past which one more hit was enough to tear the whole assembly free. Once the visor detached, the Estonia was, in practical terms, already doomed. The visor had shielded the bow ramp from direct wave impact. Without it, the ramp became the front wall of the ship against the storm. Waves slammed into that now exposed ramp, forcing it open and allowing seawater to pour directly onto the car deck. This is where the design of a roll-on, roll-off ferry becomes lethal. The vehicle deck is a wide, mostly open space stretching almost the full width of the ship. As water spread across that deck, the ship was hit by the free surface effect. Water sloshes across the open deck as the ship rolls, always shifting toward the lower side. This moving mass of water rapidly kills transverse stability, magnifying any list. Once enough water is on the deck, the ship's riding ability collapses, and the list can race past recoverable angles in minutes or less. On Estonia, that is exactly what happened. As seawater raced in, the list increased so quickly that there was no meaningful time to counter it with ballast, no realistic window for a controlled evacuation. Passengers went from uneasy rolls to climbing walls in a matter of minutes. The engineering failure at the bow had already written the ending. It is tempting to see Estonia as a unique catastrophe, a one-off. It was not. Before 1994, several roll-on, roll-off ferries had experienced bow door and visor failures or serious damage in heavy seas. In some cases, doors bent. In others, locks tore, or water flooded car decks without causing a full loss of the ship.
But these incidents were treated as local problems, a specific operator, a specific route, a specific maintenance issue. 3 systemic issues emerge. Fragmented learning. Incidents in one flag state or company did not automatically feed into a global design rethink. Commercial pressure. Faster turnarounds and high vehicle capacity made roll-on, roll-off ferries profitable. Structural upgrades that cut capacity or slowed operations were difficult to sell. And regulatory lag. Rules assumed watertight bow structures and did not fully account for how catastrophic car deck flooding could be in minutes. The Estonia was not uniquely flawed, it was emblematic, a representative of a class of ships where a known weak point at the bow had been normalized rather than eliminated. Why no one pulled the emergency brake? It's easy to look back and ask why someone didn't stop Estonia before that night, why no designer, inspector, or operator pulled the emergency brake. The harder truth is that most of them were working inside a rule set that said the ship was acceptable. Designers drew a ferry that complied with the standards of its time. The standards themselves underestimated real-world loads and failure modes. Classification societies and flag states approved drawings and surveys based on assumptions that turned out to be unsafe, particularly around wave slam and the consequences of car deck flooding. Operators believed that if the ship had its certificates, it was fit to sail. Compliance was equated with safety. In this sense, responsibility is widely distributed. The system allowed a design that could be lost from a single structural failure at the bow, and no one actor had enough information, authority, and urgency combined to demand a fundamental redesign before disaster forced the issue. Storms are easy to point at. They are cinematic, uncontrollable, and familiar villains. For a time, framing Estonia as a weather disaster, the sea was too strong, offered a simple explanation that avoided deeper questions about design and regulation. But detailed investigations, modeling, and later re-examinations up through the 2020s have reinforced a consistent conclusion. The bow visor arrangement on Estonia could not withstand the kind of repeated wave loads it faced that night. The failure of that visor and subsequent ramp opening were foreseeable modes, not freak anomalies. Once water reached the car deck, the stability margin was too thin to prevent rapid capsizing. Weather provided the trigger. Engineering decisions, regulatory assumptions, and cultural habits around acceptable risk determined the outcome.
Estonia did not spark a single dramatic courtroom scene that solved the disaster. Instead, it drove a quieter, more profound reckoning in the maritime world. Policymakers, engineers, and regulators used Estonia as a case study in what happens when convenience and legacy assumptions outrun conservative design. Over the following years, rules were rewritten, hulls were reshaped, and entire fleets were retrofitted. Not because one villain was unmasked, but because a system that had seemed adequate was proven fatally optimistic. If the sea exposed the flaw, regulation would be forced to seal it. Engineering after Estonia, how the industry changed. The Stockholm Agreement and Solus Amendments, 1996. One of the most important changes after Estonia was the shift in how regulators thought about damaged stability on roll-on, roll-off ferries. The Stockholm Agreement and related Solus amendments required that ferries be able to survive with a defined depth of water, often cited as 50 centimeters, on their car decks. Why does that matter? Because it assumes flooding will happen. Designers now have to model ferries as if some water will be on the vehicle deck after an accident. Stability is no longer a best-case metric. It has to be maintained in a damaged state. Ship plans must show that even with a shallow lake sloshing back and forth on the car deck, the vessel will retain enough righting energy to avoid sudden capsize. This fundamentally reoriented design philosophy. Instead of betting everything on preventing water ingress, regulations began demanding survivability after ingress. The end of the detachable bow visor. A second change attacked the weak point directly. Detachable bow visors, like Estonia's, were progressively phased out or significantly reinforced across roll-on, roll-off fleets. In many cases, they were replaced by fixed bow doors integrated structurally into the hull, designed as part of the primary strength member rather than a hinged appendage. Stronger locking systems with greater redundancy, distributing loads across more elements. Reinforced bow areas specifically calculated to withstand wave slam in worst-case storm conditions at service speed. The goal was to remove the single point of catastrophic failure at the bow. If something fails now, it is far less likely to be a single structural component whose loss opens a highway for the sea straight onto the car deck. Breaking the free surface effect. Regulators also moved against the mechanism that had turned Estonia from damaged to doomed in minutes: the free surface effect on a wide open vehicle deck. Post-Estonia, many roll-on, roll-off ferries were built or retrofitted with longitudinal bulkheads running along the deck, dividing it into narrower lanes. Watertight or semi-watertight partitions that limit how far water can spread. These measures prevent water from freely racing from side to side across the full width of the ship. Instead of one huge moving mass that destroys stability quickly, water is confined to smaller compartments. The ship may still list, may still be in danger, but the timeline stretches from minutes to potentially much longer, survivable windows. In effect, designers started assuming there will be a breach and then asking, how do we stop it from becoming instantly fatal? Retrofitting the past, hull sponsons. New ships can be designed from scratch with better stability margins. Old ships needed surgery. After Estonia, one of the most visible retrofits was the addition of hull sponsons, side extensions welded to existing hulls. These blisters widen the waterplane area and add buoyancy low down. They increase a ship's resistance to listing and improve its stability curve when partly flooded. You can see these additions from the quay. Older roll-on, roll-off ferries with new bulges along the sides are in a literal sense physically reshaped by Estonia's legacy. They are a permanent steel and weld reminder that past assumptions were not good enough. The citadel concept in modern ferry design. Beyond specific fixes, Estonia accelerated a broader shift toward designing ships with internal citadels, zones of reserved buoyancy and protected systems. In modern passenger ferries, critical spaces like emergency generators, command centers, and key systems are placed in better protected volumes. Structural and compartment layouts aim to ensure that even with multiple flooded areas, a core of the ship remains intact and buoyant. The intent is not to make ships invincible. That is impossible. It is to make them less binary, to allow a vessel to be badly wounded without being immediately doomed. Estonia's rapid capsize showed that having all or nothing is not acceptable. Designers now aim for a survivable middle ground. Would Estonia sink the same way today? No modern ferry is invincible. The sea can still find new combinations of error and misfortune. But if an Estonia-type ship were built and operated under today's post-Estonia rules, the failure sequence would almost certainly look different. A visor or bow door would be structurally stronger and more redundant, making outright detachment far less likely under the same storm loads. If water did reach the car deck, longitudinal bulkheads and partitions would limit its spread, breaking the free surface effect that toppled Estonia so quickly. Stability margins would be larger, and the ship would be required to demonstrate survivability with significant water on the deck. A single visor failure would not be automatically equivalent to the immediate loss of the ship. Flooding could still be deadly, but it would likely be slower, more contained, and far more survivable. Evacuation time, rather than seconds and a few desperate minutes, might be measured in tens of minutes or longer. Modern ferries are increasingly built around layered safety, stronger structures, compartmentalization, better damaged stability, and more conservative assumptions about what can go wrong. They are no longer balanced quite so precariously on one failure away from catastrophe.
The Estonia disaster is not just a story about steel and storms, it's an archive of loss written into regulations, bulkheads, and spreadsheets. Every new ferry that meets post-Estonia standards carries in its scantlings and compartment diagrams the memory of 852 people who did not reach Stockholm. Engineering, at its best, is a way of remembering. It takes nights like the one on the Baltic and encodes them into rules about door strength, into extra millimeters of plate thickness, into new rows of watertight doors and life raft capacity. It turns grief into geometry. The sea did not change after Estonia. The Baltic is no kinder now than it was in 1994, but the ships that cross it are different. Their bows are stronger, their decks are partitioned, their stability margins are thicker with experience. Engineering changed because it had to.